In this video, you create a kitchen worktop as an in-place family. The in-place family is created by referencing existing project geometry and is created in the context of your project. In-place families are intended for bespoke elements that are unique to a single project. Additionally, you associate a material parameter to the worktop and then control all the worktops from a global parameter. Go ahead and open up the kitchen project. The project opens in the 3D view. In this particular project, our task is to create a bespoke kitchen worktop that will sit on top of the existing casework components. To enable us to create an accurate worktop, we'll need to reference the project geometry. Also, this worktop will be unique to this project. This is an ideal use case for an in-place family. To begin, we'll open up the floor plan level 1. In the project browser, under the floor plans folder, let's double click on level 1. We'll begin by creating our in-place family. To do this, on the architecture ribbon in the build panel, we'll select the component drop-down, and here we'll select model in place. In the family category and parameters dialog, we must assign a category. In our case here, we'll assign the category casework and select OK. We're then prompted to give this new family a name. In this case here, we'll simply call this worktop 1 and select OK. You'll now notice that our ribbon structure has changed, and here you can see that we have a Create ribbon and a Forms panel. Here we can create solid geometry or void geometry. We'll begin by creating a solid extrusion. To do this, on the Forms panel, let's select Extrusion. You'll notice by default in the Draw panel, the line is automatically selected for us. What we're going to do here is trace off the outside boundary of our casework and actually have a 1.5 inch overhang. To create that overhang, on the options bar, you'll note that we can add in an offset. Let's set this to 1.5 inches. We can now use the casework in plan to trace the boundary of our worktop. Let's begin in the bottom right hand corner. And here we can just start to snap to the existing casework to form our offset boundary. Notice as we snap around the casework components that we now have that 1.5 inch cantilever. We'll stop at the refrigerator here. And of course at this point we don't want that 1.5 inch cantilever, so we can go onto the options bar and we'll set this to 0. We'll then snap it back to the wall finish. And of course now we can trace off the wall finish just to complete our profile. Okay, so we'll draw our final line in here, and you can now see that we have a closed profile for our worktop. Another thing we'll need to take into account is the opening for our double sink unit. To do this, we're going to utilize pick lines, and we'll have an offset from the sink unit of 0.5 inch. To do this, on the Draw panel, let's select Pick Lines. On the Options bar, we'll change our offset to 0.5 inch, and we'll then select the edge of the sink unit here, and we'll create our 0.5 inch offset. Of course, this will need to be trimmed, so again, on the context ribbon in the Modify panel, we'll use Trim Extend to Corner. We can then start to trim off the corner elements that we don't require, and you can now see we have our finished boundary. Finally, in the bottom right hand corner, you can see that we have a sharp edge here. We'll put a fillet radius on that to actually create a nice smooth blend. To do this, in the Draw panel, we'll go ahead and select Fillet Arc. On the Options bar, we'll check the radius option, and we'll use the default of 2 inches. We'll pick the 2 lines, and you can now see we have our fillet arc created. To finalize the extrusion on the context ribbon, we'll go ahead and select Finish Edit Mode. The extrusion has now been extruded 1.5 inches high. That can be changed in the Properties palette. You'll notice here we have Extrusion End, which is set to 1.5 inches. We'll leave this at 1.5 inches for our new work surface. Let's press Escape to deselect the extrusion, and we'll review our design in the 3D view. We'll notice that the work surface is currently on the floor. Of course, this should have been on the worktops. Let's now change the active work plane. So I'll select our work surface, and if we look at the context ribbon in the work plane panel, you can see we have Edit Work Plane. Let's select this. In the work plane dialog, we can change the work plane from level 1 to our reference plane, Worktop. And you'll now notice that the work surface is now at the correct level. So let's now review our design in 3D. So we can clearly see our radius detail here. We can see that we have an opening for the sink unit here, but the thing we need to change is this sharp edge on the top of the work surface. We'll use a void sweep to actually create a nice radius on that edge. To do this, we'll go ahead and select the Create ribbon, and on the Forms panel, we'll select the Void Form pull-down menu, and here we'll select Void Sweep. On the Context ribbon in the Work Plane panel, we'll select Pick Path. Pick 3D Edges is the default option, and we can now start to select the top edge of our work surface. You'll notice the first edge I've picked now defines the profile plane. So now we'll continually pick the edges in here. Of course, we can orbit the model as required. And our edges are now complete. To finalize the path, we'll select Finish Edit Mode. We'll select the Modify Sweep Context ribbon, and in the Sweep panel, we can now select our profile. Loaded into this project already, we have some radius profiles, and you can see there's 4 different types of radius. We'll select the radius profile 1 inch. If we zoom into our profile plane, we can now clearly see that this particular profile is not in the correct orientation. On the options bar, we have the option here of either rotating or flipping this. Let's click on Flip. You'll now notice that the radius is in the correct orientation. So once again, we can finalize this void sweep by selecting Finish Edit Mode. You can now see our void sweep created. Finally, we'll assign a material to our new worktop. This material will be controlled with the type parameter. So let's select the worktop. In the Properties palette, we can now see that there's currently no material assigned. We'll select Associate Family Parameter. We'll need to create a new parameter to control our worktop material. So in the Associate Family Parameter dialog, we'll select New Parameter. And for the name, we'll call this Worktop Material. This will be a type parameter. We'll group this under Materials and Finishes and select OK. And then OK again to the Associate Family Parameter. We can now complete our in-place family. On the Context ribbon, let's go ahead and select Finish Model. We're now back in our project environment. This particular kitchen design could have several different worktops that are separate. In order to make sure that we've got a consistent material that can be applied to all of those in-place families, we can use a global parameter to control this. Let's first look at this global parameter. To begin, we'll select the Manage ribbon, and in the Settings panel, we'll select Global Parameters. In the Global Parameter dialog, you can see that we have a global parameter titled Worktop Material, and you'll notice that it has a value or a material applied to it called Granite Worktop. Let's click OK to the Global Parameters dialog. We'll now make sure that our worktop now uses that global parameter. To do this, we'll select our new worktop. In the Properties palette, we'll select Edit Type. We can now see that our parameter Worktop Material is currently unassigned. However, we'll now associate a global parameter. We can then select Worktop Material, click OK to the Associate Global Parameter dialog, and OK again to our Type Properties dialog. And we can now see we have our new material applied. Of course, the benefit of this is if we want to change the material across the entire project, we can now simply go to the Manage ribbon, back into Global Parameters, and if we change the material here, it will update the entire project. Let's click OK to the Global Parameters dialog, and our in-place family and worktops are now complete.